The first sound that escaped his lips was not a word. It was a laugh. A sharp, ugly, ripping laugh that cut through the humid Manila air like a broken bottle. Inside a cramped, windowless training room in Quezon City, 23 Indian call center trainees had just heard a recording of their own voices trying to speak English with an American accent. Their supervisor, a local hire named Mr. Gupta, played the tape back for them. What they heard was not Texas or New York. What they heard was a parody of themselves. But then one of them, a skinny boy from Mumbai named Rohan, mimicked the way their Filipino quality assurance coach spoke. He flattened the vowels. He stretched the L's into a wet, smiling sound. He said, "Mabuhay, sir, can I help you today?" The room exploded. 23 young men and women, all of them desperate for their first international call center job, all of them terrified of failing the final accent exam, suddenly found a target for their fear. They mocked the Filipino accent for 10 straight minutes. They did not know that behind the two-way mirror, a man named Iman Cruz was watching. He was their new coach. He was Filipino, and he had exactly 10 days to turn their shame into a weapon. On the first day of training, Iman introduced himself with a soft voice that barely filled the room. He was not tall. He was not loud. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been carved by patience. High cheekbones, tired eyes, a small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident in Cebu. He wrote his name on the whiteboard, Emmanuel Cruz. Then he wrote 3 numbers, 1078-2. 10 days, he said. 78% of you will fail the final accent exam if you keep training the way you are training now. 2% of you will quit before the 10th day. Rohan, the skinny boy from Mumbai, raised his hand. "Sir, why are we learning English from a Filipino? Your accent is not American. You sound like, how do I say, like you are always smiling." Another laugh rippled through the room. A girl named Priya whispered to her friend, "He speaks English like he is singing a lullaby." Iman did not smile. He did not frown. He simply pulled a small audio recorder from his pocket and pressed play. The room heard a recording of a customer service call. The voice on the tape was crisp, neutral, almost robotic. It sounded like a native speaker from Chicago. "That was me," Iman said, 8 years ago. Before I moved to Manila. Before I trained 2,000 agents. Before I learned that accents are not mistakes. Accents are maps. They show where you have been. But if you want to sound American in 10 days, you will stop mocking and start listening. He placed a single piece of paper on every desk. The paper had no words, just a drawing of a mouth with arrows pointing to the tongue, the lips, the soft palate. "Tomorrow," he said, "we rebuild your mouths from the inside." That night, Rohan could not sleep. He shared a cramped boarding house room with 3 other trainees in a neighborhood called Cubeo. The walls were thin. The air was thick with the smell of instant noodles and sweat. His mother had called him earlier that day from Mumbai. "Beta, your father sold his watch to pay for your flight. Do not come back without a job." Rohan stared at the ceiling. He thought about the Filipino coach. He thought about the drawing of the mouth. He thought about the way Iman had pressed play on that recorder without a single shake in his hand. The man had been mocked to his face. He had not flinched. Why? Rohan pulled out his phone and searched Emmanuel Cruz. What he found made him sit up straight. Iman had been a call center agent in Cebu at 19. He had been so poor that he walked 10 kilometers to work because he could not afford the jeepney fare. He had been laughed at by his own team for his Bisaya accent. He had recorded himself speaking every single night for 2 years. He had developed a method, a system of physical exercises for the tongue, the jaw, the breath, and he had never, ever lost his temper. The article ended with a quote from Iman. "The greatest weapon against mockery is not anger. It is transformation." Rohan put down the phone. He felt something cold move down his spine. It was not fear. It was a beginning of respect. Day 2 began differently. Iman did not speak for the first 5 minutes. He simply stood at the front of the room and made a series of sounds. Not words. Sounds. A longy sound that seemed to come from the back of his throat. A TH sound where his tongue peeked between his teeth, like a small animal. An R sound that rolled just slightly before snapping straight. He gestured for class to follow. Priya tried. Her R was too hard. Rohan tried. His TH became AD. A boy named Vikram laughed and said, "This is ridiculous. We are not babies." Iman walked to Vikram's desk. He knelt down so their eyes were level. "Vikram," he said softly, "when you were a baby, you learned to speak your mother tongue by listening to your mother's mouth. You did not laugh at yourself. You just tried. Then you tried again. Then you succeeded. What changed?" Vikram looked away. Iman stood up. "What changed is that you became afraid of sounding foolish. But I will tell you a secret. The only people who never sound foolish are the people who never try anything new. And those people work in dead jobs for dead pay." He returned to front. "Now, again, Tage, like air passing through a small door. For the next 3 hours, 23 young Indians made the sound of infants. They blew air through their teeth. They held their tongues with their fingers to feel the placement. They recorded themselves and played it back. And slowly, very slowly, the room grew quieter. Not because they stopped trying, because they started listening. On day 3, Iman introduced the exercise that would break them. He called it the ghost call. Each trainee had to stand in front of class, close their eyes, and take a live mock call from a recording of an angry American customer. But here was the trap. The recording was intentionally distorted. Words were scrambled, sentences cut off in the middle. The customer screamed, "You people never listen," and then the line went silent for 3 full seconds. Most trainees froze. Priya started crying mid-sentence. Vikram yelled, "Hello? Hello?" into the dead air. Rohan managed to say, "I understand your frustration, sir," but his voice cracked on the word frustration. When it was over, Iman asked one question. What did the customer feel? Everyone gave the same answer. Anger, frustration, impatience. On day 3, Iman introduced the exercise that would break them. He called it the ghost call. Each trainee had to stand in front of the class, close their eyes, and take a live mock call from a recording of an angry American customer. But here was the trap. The recording was intentionally distorted. Words were scrambled, sentences cut off in the middle. The customer screamed, "You people never listen," and then the line went silent for 3 full seconds. Most trainees froze. Priya started crying mid-sentence. Vikram yelled, "Hello? Hello?" into the dead air. Rohan managed to say, "I understand your frustration, sir," but his voice cracked on the word frustration. When it was over, Iman asked one question. What did the customer feel? Everyone gave the same answer. Anger, frustration, impatience. Iman shook his head. Wrong. The customer felt afraid. He was afraid that no one would help him. He was afraid that his problem was too small to matter. He was afraid that he had called a machine instead of a human. Your accent is not the problem. Your inability to hear fear is the problem. He dimmed the lights. He played the same distorted recording again, but this time he told them to ignore the words. Listen to the spaces, he said. Listen to the breath. That tiny inhale before he screams, that is the sound of man trying not to cry. The room went silent. Someone sniffled. It was not Priya. It was Vikram. He had heard it, the breath, the almost cry, and for the first time, he did not feel mocked by the Filipino coach. He felt seen. Day 4 was the day of the first betrayal. The call center's operations manager, a sharp-tongued Singaporean named Mrs. Tan, walked into the room unannounced. She was known for firing people on the spot. She wore red heels that clicked like gunshots on the tile floor. "Cruz," she said, not looking at the trainees. "The client heard about your methods. They want results by day 7, or we replace you with a native speaker from Texas." Iman did not blink. "I will show results on day 7. Mrs. Tan laughed. It was a dry, papery sound. "With these, half of them can't pronounce the word schedule." She turned to the class. "You have 4 days. Do not waste them." Then she left. The silence that followed was heavier than any mockery. Rohan looked at Iman. For the first time, he saw a crack in the coach's composure. A tiny tremor in the jaw. A quick blink. Then it was gone. "Back to work," Iman said. But his voice was thinner now. Sharper. He was afraid. And if he was afraid, they were terrified. That night, after everyone else had left, Rowan stayed behind. He found Iman sitting alone in the dark observation room, staring at the two-way mirror. The reflection showed an empty classroom. "Sir," Rowan said, "why did you take this job? You could train anyone. Rich people, actors. Why us?" Iman did not turn around. "Because 10 years ago I was you. I was mocked by my own people. I was told I would never sound American. I was told my face was wrong, my name was wrong, my mouth was wrong." He paused. "My mother died while I was on a call. I was trying to sound like someone I was not. I was saying, 'Thank you for calling, my name is Michael.' And she was dying alone in a hospital bed 2 kilometers away." Rohan felt his chest collapse. "I am sorry, sir." Iman finally turned. His eyes were wet, but his voice was stone. "Do not be sorry. Be better. In 6 days, you will take the final exam. You will pass, and you will never, ever mock someone for the way they speak, because you will know that every accent carries a grave." They sat in silence for a long time. Then Iman stood up and handed Rohan a small notebook. Inside were 100 pages of tongue exercises. "Study this until your jaw aches," he said. "Then study it again." Day 5 brought the rain. A typhoon was brushing the edge of Luzon, and the windows of the training room rattled like teeth. The power flickered twice. Iman used the darkness as a teaching tool. He told everyone to close their eyes. He turned off all the lights. "Now," he said, "you will speak to each other without seeing each other's faces. You will only hear the voice. And you will tell me one thing. What is the emotion behind the words?" He went around the room. Each trainee said a simple sentence. "I need help with my bill." But each trainee had to say it with a different emotion. Fear, exhaustion, hope, shame. Then the others had to guess. Priya said it with such quiet desperation that Vikram whispered, "She sounds like my mother when the rent was due." Rohan said it with a flat, cold voice that made someone else say, "He sounds like he's given up." Iman nodded. "Good. You are finally listening to the human behind the accent. That is worth more than any vowel shift." When the lights came back on, something had changed. The trainees were no longer 23 individuals. They were a unit. They corrected each other gently. They laughed at their own mistakes without cruelty. And when Rohan stumbled over the word specific, turning it into Pacific, no one mocked him. Priya simply said, "Try again. Slower. Feel the S at the front of your teeth." He tried again. He got it right. And for the first time, the room applauded. Day 6 was the day of the broken mirror. During a breathing exercise, Vikram lost his temper. He had been trying to pronounce the American R for 3 hours, the one that does not roll, the one that sounds like a growling dog. He slammed his fist on the desk. A small hand mirror, the kind Iman had given everyone to watch their own mouths, fell to the floor and shattered. "I cannot do this." Vikram shouted, "I sound like a fool. My father paid $5,000 for this course, and I sound like a cartoon." He was breathing hard. His face was red. The other trainees stared at the floor. Iman walked to the broken mirror. He knelt down. He picked up the largest shard. He held it up to his own face. "Vikram," he said quietly, "look." Vikram looked. In the shard, he saw Iman's face, but the reflection was cracked. The eye was split from the mouth. "This is what you think you are." Iman said, "Broken, wrong, unfixable." Then he dropped the shard and pulled a second mirror from his pocket. Unbroken, clean, he handed it to Vikram. "This is what you actually are. Whole, capable, just learning." Vikram took the mirror. His hand shook. Then he did something no one expected. He laughed, not a mocking laugh, a broken, relieved, exhausted laugh. "You are very patient, sir," he said. "I would have fired me." Iman smiled. It was the first time the class had seen him smile. "Vikram," he said, "I was fired 3 times before I learned to teach. Patience is not a gift. It is a scar." Day 7 was a client test. Mrs. Tan returned with 3 American auditors on a video call. The trainees had to take live mock calls while being recorded. If more than 5 failed, Iman would be replaced. The room was cold. The air conditioning had been turned to maximum. not for comfort, but to keep the equipment from overheating. Rowan was called first. He sat in the hot seat, a single chair facing a camera and a headset. The American auditor on the screen was a bald man with a bored face. He said, "I've been on hold for 20 minutes. My internet is down. I want a refund." Rohan's heart hammered. He took a breath. He remembered Iman's words. Listen to the spaces. He heard the tiny inhale before the man spoke. Fear. The man was afraid. "Sir," Rohan said, his voice steady but warm, "I hear how frustrating this is. If I were in your shoes, I would be angry too. Let me fix this for you. Can I put you on a brief hold while I check your account?" The auditor blinked. He had expected a script. Instead, he got a human. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." Rohan passed. Priya passed. Vikram passed. One by one, they sat in the chair, and one by one, they spoke not with perfect accents, but with perfect empathy. At the end, Mrs. Tan tallied the scores. 21 passed. 2 failed. The 2 who failed had frozen. They had reverted to reading from a script. Iman did not look at them with anger. He put a hand on each of their shoulders. "You will try again," he said, "and you will pass." Mrs. Tan stared at Iman for a long moment. Then she gave a single nod. "You keep your job, Cruz." She left without another word. The trainees did not cheer. They were too exhausted. But Priya started crying. Then Vikram started crying. Then Rohan put his arm around Iman's shoulders and said, "You did it, sir." And Iman, for the first time in 10 years, cried in front of another person. The next 2 days were not about accents. They were about goodbye. Iman taught them one final lesson. He wrote a single word on the whiteboard. Home. "You will all get jobs," he said. "You will move to different cities. Some of you will go to America, some to Dubai. Some will stay here in Manila. But do not forget where you started. Do not forget that you once could not say the word specific. Do not forget that you mocked a Filipino accent, and then learn to love the sound of your own voice." He erased the word. Then he wrote another, brotherhood. "You came here as strangers. You leave as something else. Not friends, not colleagues, brothers and sisters who have bled together over a single vowel. That is rare. That is precious. Do not waste it." That night, the 23 trainees took him on to a small carinderia, a Filipino street eatery, and forced him to eat lechon kawali and drink tuba, coconut wine. Rowan made a toast. "To the man who taught us that an accent is not a wall. It is a door." Iman raised his glass. His hand was steady. "To your mothers," he said. "To your fathers. To every person who ever told you that you were not enough. They were wrong." They drank until the rain stopped. Day 10 arrived like a thief. The final exam was not a mock call. It was a live call to a real customer in Texas. The call center had arranged for a volunteer, an elderly woman named Margaret, who had complained for months about her cable bill. She was known to be difficult. She had made 3 agents cry. Rohan drew the short straw. He sat in the hot seat. The headset felt heavier than before. Margaret's voice crackled through the line. She was not angry. She was worse. She was tired. "Young man," she said, "I've been with your company for 15 years. I have explained my problem 11 times. I don't believe you can help me. I don't believe anyone can help me." Rowan felt his throat close. He wanted to read from the script. He wanted to say, "I understand your frustration." But that was not true. He did not understand. He had never been an old woman in Texas. He had never paid a cable bill for 15 years. He had never been ignored 11 times. So he said something else. "Ma'am," he said, "I can't promise I can fix your problem, but I can promise I will listen to you for as long as it takes. And if I cannot fix it, I will find someone who can. I will not transfer you to a machine. I will stay on this line until you hang up." There was a long silence. Then Margaret laughed. It was a dry, tired laugh, but it was real. "You know what, young man? You sound different. You sound like you mean it." Rohan smiled. "I do mean it, ma'am." He fixed her problem in 12 minutes. When the call ended, the room was silent. Then Iman clapped. Just once. 2 palms. A single, sharp sound. Then the whole room erupted. But this story does not end with applause. It ends with a tragedy that no one saw coming. 3 months after the training ended, Rohan received a message from Priya. It was a single sentence. Iman is in a hospital. He had collapsed during a training session with a new batch of recruits. The doctors said it was his heart. Years of stress. Years of sleeping 4 hours a night. Years of carrying the weight of every trainee who had ever been mocked. Rohan flew back to Manila. He sat by Iman's bedside in a public hospital that smelled of bleach and old flowers. Iman's eyes were open, but they were dim. His hand was cold. "Sir," Rohan said, "you cannot leave. You have too many people to save." Iman smiled. It was a small, tired smile. "Rohan," he whispered, "I saved the ones who mattered. The rest will save themselves." He closed his eyes. For one terrible moment, Rohan thought it was over. Then Iman opened his eyes again. "Do not be sad," he said. "Be the coach now. Mockery is a disease. Kindness is a cure. Teach that." Those were his last words. Emmanuel Cruz died at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, with an Indian boy he had transformed holding his hand. The room was quiet. The rain had stopped. And somewhere in Texas, an old woman named Margaret was watching television, never knowing that the young man who had listened to her had just lost a man who taught him how. The funeral was small. Iman had no family left. His mother was gone. His father had died when he was 12. No wife, no children, only trainees. Over 200 of them came from across the world, from Dubai, from Texas, from Singapore, from Mumbai. They filled the small chapel in Quezon City until people were standing outside in the heat. Priya gave a eulogy. She spoke about the first day, about the mocking, about the ugly laugh that cut through the room. "We came to him as children who did not know any better," she said. "He did not punish us. He did not shame us. He simply showed us a mirror and said, 'Look, you are not broken. You are just beginning.'" Vikram spoke next. He held the same hand mirror that Iman had given him on day 6. "I broke a mirror in his class," he said. He picked up the pieces. He showed me that even broken things can reflect the truth. Then Rohan stood. He did not speak for a long time. He just looked at the coffin. It was simple wood. No flowers on top. Just a single photograph of Iman as a young man, 19 years old, wearing a cheap headset, smiling like he had already won. "He told me once that every accent carries a grave," Rohan said. "I did not understand until now. His accent carried his mother's grave, and he carried it alone for 10 years. But he never let it make him cruel. He let it make him kind. That is the hardest thing a person can do." He placed his hand on the coffin. "Goodbye, sir. I will be the coach now." After the funeral, Rohan did not return to Mumbai. He stayed in Manila. He applied for a job at the same call center, where Iman had trained him. Mrs. Tan, the Singaporean manager, interviewed him personally. "You know the job pays less here than America," she said. "I know," Rohan said. "Then why stay?" Rohan pulled out the notebook Iman had given him, the one with 100 pages of tongue exercises. "Because he stayed," Rohan said. "Because he was mocked, and he did not run. Because he was tired, and he did not stop. Because he was alone, and he still showed up every single day for people who did not believe in him." Mrs. Tan was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "You start Monday. Do not make me regret this." Rohan did not make her regret it. He trained 300 agents over the next 5 years. He used Iman's method. He played the ghost call. He handed out hand mirrors. And every single time a trainee mocked another accent, Indian, Filipino, Korean, Spanish, he told them the same story. He told them about a man who heard an ugly laugh and did not get angry. He told them about a man who turned mockery into a classroom. He told them about a man who died with an Indian boy holding his hand. And then he said, "Now, open your mouths and try again." But the story does not end there either, because tragedy has a way of returning when you least expect it. On the 5th anniversary of Iman's death, Rohan received a letter. It was handwritten, postmarked from Texas. He opened it with trembling hands. The letter was from Margaret, the elderly woman whose cable bill he had fixed on day 10. She was 92 years old now. Her handwriting was shaky but clear. "Dear young man," she wrote, "I do not know your name. I only remember your voice. You listened to me when no one else would. I have thought about that call every day for 5 years. My son died last month. He was 57. He had a heart attack. And I realized something. You sound like him. Not the accent, the kindness, the way you did not give up on a tired old woman. I am sending you this letter to say thank you and to tell you that whoever taught you to speak that way, whoever taught you to listen, must have been a good man. I hope he knows." Rohan read the letter 3 times. Then he walked to the small framed photograph of Iman on his desk. He held the letter up so Iman's face could see it. "You see, sir," he whispered. "She heard you, even in my voice. She heard you." That night, Rohan called Priya. She was now a team leader at a call center in Dubai. He told her about the letter. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Do you remember what he said on the last day? About brotherhood?" "Yes," Rohan said. "He said we had bled together over a single vowel." Priya laughed. It was a wet, happy laugh. I still cannot say rural. It comes out as are you. Rohan laughed too. I still say Pacific instead of specific when I am tired. They laughed until they cried. Then Priya said, "We should go back. To Manila, to the training room. We should teach together. One more time." For him, Rohan agreed. 3 weeks later, they stood together in the same cramped, windowless room. Vikram joined them from Singapore. The 3 of them stood at the front of class, facing a new batch of trainees, young, scared, desperate. Rohan spoke first. "My name is Rohan. I am from Mumbai. 5 years ago, I mocked the Filipino accent. I thought I was better than the man who would become my teacher. I was wrong." Priya spoke next. "My name is Priya. I am from Delhi. I cried on my first mock call. I thought I was too weak for this job. I was wrong." Vikram spoke last. "My name is Vikram. I am from Bengaluru. I broke a mirror because I was angry at myself. I thought I was broken. I was wrong." They paused. Then, together, they said the words Aman had said to them on the first day. 10 days. 78% of you will fail if you keep training the way you are training now. 2% will quit. But if you listen, if you really listen, you will become something more than an agent. You will become a person who hears fear and answers with kindness. The new trainees did not laugh. They sat up straighter. They pulled out their hand mirrors. And somewhere in a small grave in a Manila cemetery, a tired man with a scar above his eyebrow smiled in his sleep. This is a story of how a group of Indian call center trainees learned to stop mocking and start listening. It is a story of a Filipino coach who turned shame into strength. It is a story of brotherhood forged in fluorescent light and cheap coffee. It is a story of love that survived mockery, tragedy that could not break a promise, and a voice that still speaks from a grave. But most of all, it is a story of a single lesson, that an accent is not a mistake. It is a map. It shows where you have been. And if you are brave enough to listen, it can also show you where you need to go. Rohan still teaches that lesson every day. Priya still cries on the first day of every batch, not from weakness, but from remembering. Vikram still keeps the broken shards of that first mirror in his desk drawer. And every time a trainee mocks another accent, they tell the story of Emmanuel Cruz. They tell it simply. They tell it clearly. They tell it like this. There was a man who heard an ugly laugh. He did not get angry. He got to work. And in 10 days, he changed everything. But wait, there is one more piece, one more twist, one more thing that Rohan discovered only after he had been teaching for 3 years. He was cleaning out Iman's old desk, the one in the observation room that no one had touched since his death. Inside the bottom drawer, beneath old training manuals and dried-out markers, Rohan found a cassette tape, not a digital file. A cassette, the kind that belonged to another century. He borrowed a player from a security guard. He pressed play. The tape crackled. Then he heard a voice. It was Iman's voice, but younger, rougher, almost unrecognizable. The voice on the tape was not the crisp, neutral American accent he had used in class. It was thick, Bisaya, the Filipino accent that the trainees had mocked on day one. Iman was speaking to himself. Day one, the voice said, "My name is Emmanuel Cruz. I am from Cebu. I am 19 years old. I sound like a farmer. I sound like a fool. But I will not sound like this forever." Then the tape clicked, and the next voice was different. Still Filipino, still warm, but clearer, sharper. Day 30, I can hear the difference. My tongue is learning. My ear is learning. I am not a fool. I am a student. The tape had 180 entries, one for every day of the first 6 months of Iman's journey. The last entry was the shortest. Day 180. I am going to Manila tomorrow. I am going to teach. I am going to tell them the truth. That no one is born with a perfect accent. That everyone is born with the ability to listen. I am ready. Rohan rewound the tape and played it again. And again. And again. He realized then that Iman had not been born patient. He had not been born kind. He had been born broke, mocked, and alone. And he had built himself, day by day, sound by sound, into the man who would save 23 strangers. That was the real lesson. Not the accent, the building. Rohan made copies of that tape. He gave one to every trainee who passed his class. He told them, "This is not a lesson in English. This is a lesson in humanity. Listen to it when you want to give up. Listen to it when you want to mock someone else. Listen to it when you forget that every single person you will ever speak to is fighting a war you cannot see." And the trainees listened. Some cried. Some laughed. Some called their parents and apologized for being ashamed of their accents. One trainee, a young woman from Kerala named Anjali, listened to the tape so many times that she memorized Iman's voice. She could recite his day one entry by heart. "My name is Emmanuel Cruz. I am from Cebu. I am 19 years old. I sound like a farmer. I sound like a fool. But I will not sound like this forever." She said those words every morning before her first call. She said them like a prayer. And when she became the top-rated agent in her center 6 months later, she sent Rohan a message. "I did not learn to sound American," she wrote. "I learned to sound like myself. Thank you. Thank Iman." Rohan printed that message and pinned it to the wall beside Iman's photograph. Underneath he wrote, "This is why we teach." But even then, the story was not finished, because 5 years after Iman's death, something happened that no one could have predicted. A call center in Texas, the same one that had employed Margaret, reached out to Rohan. They wanted to fly him to Dallas. They wanted him to train their American agents, not in accents, in empathy. "We have a problem," the director said over the phone. "Our agents sound native, but they do not listen. They rush calls. They make customers feel like numbers. We heard about your methods. We heard about your teacher. We want to learn." Rohan sat in silence for a full minute. Then he said, "I will come, but I am not the teacher. My teacher is dead. I will bring his tape. I will bring his mirrors, and I will tell his story. That is all I can do." The director agreed. Rohan flew to Texas. He stood in a glass-walled training room in Dallas, facing 30 American agents who had never been mocked for their accents. They had never walked 10 kilometers to work. They had never been told their mouths were wrong. But they had something else. They had burnout. They had numbness. They had forgotten that the voice on the other end of the line was a human being. Rohan played them the tape. Iman's young, rough, Bisaya-accented voice filled the room. "My name is Emmanuel Cruz. I am from Cebu. I am 19 years old. I sound like a farmer." The American agents shifted in their seats. Some looked confused. One whispered, "Why are we listening to this?" Rohan stopped the tape. He looked at the man who had whispered. "Because," Rohan said, "that man taught me that every voice has value, even the voices we think are wrong, even the voices we think are weak, especially those voices." He handed out hand mirrors. "Now, open your mouths and try again." The training in Texas lasted 2 weeks. The American agents struggled, not with pronunciation, with patience. They wanted shortcuts. They wanted scripts. Rohan gave them none. Instead, he made them sit in silence for 5 minutes every morning, just listening to the hum of the air conditioning. That hum, he said, is what a customer hears when you are not listening. That hum is loneliness. Do not be the hum. Be the voice that breaks it. On the 7th day, a young agent named Kyle broke down. He was 24, blonde, and had been told his whole life that he had a good voice for radio. But he could not pass the empathy test. Every time a mock customer said something sad, Kyle said, "I understand," in a flat, dead tone. Rohan pulled him aside after class. "Kyle," he said, "when was the last time someone listened to you?" Kyle looked at the floor. "My dad died last year," he whispered. "I told my supervisor I needed a day off. She said, 'Everyone has problems, Kyle.' That was it. That was all the listening I got." Rohan felt his chest tighten. "Then you know exactly how the customer feels. You are not broken, Kyle. You are just hurt. And hurt people do not need scripts. They need witnesses." Kyle cried for 10 minutes. Rohan did not speak. He just sat there listening. The next day, Kyle passed every test. He later wrote to Rohan, "You did not teach me to sound different. You taught me to stop being afraid of sounding real." Rohan returned to Manila a month later. He brought gifts from the American agents, a Texas flag, a cowboy hat, and a letter signed by all 30. The letter said, "Thank you for teaching us that empathy is not a skill. It is a choice. We choose to listen now." Rohan placed the letter next to Iman's photograph. He stood there for a long time, looking at the face of the man who had started it all. Then he heard a knock on the door. It was Mrs. Tan. She was retired now, gray-haired and walking with a cane. She looked at the wall of letters and photographs and mirrors. "You know," she said, "I was wrong about him, about Iman. I thought he was soft. I thought his methods were foolish. I see now that I was a fool." Rohan shook his head. "You were not a fool, ma'am. You were just afraid. Fear makes us cruel. Iman taught me that." Mrs. Tan nodded slowly. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden box. "I found this in storage. It belonged to him. I think you should have it." Rohan opened the box. Inside was a single item, Iman's first headset, the one he had worn as a 19-year-old agent in Cebu. The foam on the earpieces was worn down to the plastic. The wire was wrapped in electrical tape. Rohan held it like a relic. He put it on his desk. He never used it, but he never moved it. It stayed there, a silent reminder that every expert was once a beginner, every master was once a fool, and every voice, no matter how rough, deserves to be heard. 10 years after Iman's death, Rohan received a letter from the Philippine government. They wanted to honor Emmanuel Cruz with a posthumous award for contributions to English language training and cross-cultural understanding. There would be a ceremony in Manila. Rohan was asked to accept on behalf of Iman's family. He agreed. On the day of the ceremony, Rohan wore a simple white polo shirt, the same kind Iman had worn. Priya flew in from Dubai. Vikram came from Singapore. Kyle came from Texas. Anjali came from Kerala. Over 400 trainees filled the auditorium. Rohan stood at the podium. He did not read a speech. He pressed play on a cassette player. Iman's voice filled the hall. "My name is Emmanuel Cruz. I am from Cebu. I am 19 years old. I sound like a farmer. I sound like a fool. But I will not sound like this forever." The auditorium was silent except for the tape. Then, as the voice continued through day 30, day 90, day 180, people began to cry. Not loud sobs, quiet tears, the kind that come when you realize that greatness is not born. It is recorded. It is practiced. It is earned one sound at a time. When the tape ended, Rohan spoke just one sentence. He did not sound like a fool. He sounded like a hero. And now you know his name. The applause lasted 7 minutes. But there is one final image, one final moment that no one saw except Rohan. After the ceremony, after the applause faded and the auditorium emptied, Rohan walked alone to the cemetery where Iman was buried. It was a small plot in a public cemetery, marked by a simple gray stone. The engraving read, "Emmanuel Cruz, 1985 to 2026. He listened." Rohan knelt down. He placed a posthumous award, a small bronze medallion, on the grave. Then he took out the cassette tape and a small portable player. He pressed play. But this time, he did not play Mon's voice. He played his own, a recording he had made the night before. "Hello, sir," his voice said. "My name is Rohan. I am from Mumbai. I am 34 years old. I used to mock the Filipino accent. Now I teach it, not the accent, the lesson behind it. I have trained 900 agents. I have told your story 2,000 times. I have not forgotten your mother. I have not forgotten your heart. I have not forgotten the way you cried when we passed the test. I am not you, sir, but I am trying to be, every day, one sound at a time." Rohan stopped the tape. He looked at the grave. The sun was setting. The sky was orange and purple. He placed his hand on the cool stone. "You are not forgotten," he whispered. "You are the beginning, and I will make sure there is no end." And so the story continues, not as a legend, not as a fairy tale, as a living, breathing thing that happens every day in a cramped training room in Quezon City, where a new batch of trainees sits with hand mirrors and trembling hearts. Rohan is still there. Priya visits once a year. Vikram sends boxes of hand mirrors from Singapore. Kyle calls every Christmas. Anjali became a trainer herself, and now has her own wall of letters and photographs. The method of manual crews created has been copied by call centers in 12 countries. But the heart of it, the part that cannot be copied, is the story. The story of a young man from Cebu who sounded like a farmer and refused to stay that way. The story of a coach who heard an ugly laugh and answered with a mirror. The story of a death that became a beginning. Rohan tells that story on the first day of every training. He tells it simply. He tells it clearly. He tells it like this. There was a man who was mocked. He did not mock back. He worked. He listened. He loved. He died. And then he lived again. In every voice that chooses kindness over cruelty. That is not a lesson in English. That is a lesson in being human. Now, open your mouths and try again. This is the end of the story you asked for. But in truth, there is no end. Every time someone listens instead of mocks, Iman's voice speaks again. Every time someone chooses patience over anger, his lesson lives. Every time a trainee stumbles over a word and another trainee says, "Try again," slower, "I will wait," the cycle continues. Rohan knows this. That is why he keeps teaching. That is why he keeps the broken mirror shards in his drawer. That is why he plays the tape for every new batch. He is not trying to create perfect American accents. He is trying to create imperfect, brave, listening human beings. And he is succeeding. One trainee at a time. One sound at a time. One choice at a time. So if you ever find yourself in a call center in Manila or Dallas or Dubai or Mumbai, and you hear a voice that sounds a little different, a little warmer, a little slower, a little more human, do not mock it. That voice might belong to someone who was trained by Rohan, who was taught by Iman, who learned that an accent is not a wall. It is a door. And behind that door is a person who has walked 10 kilometers, who has lost a mother, who has been told they are not enough. That person is not asking for your judgment. They are asking for your ear. Give it to them. It costs nothing. And it might save everything. This is the story of Emmanuel Cruz. This is the story of Rohan, Priya, Vikram, Kyle, and Anjali. This is the story of 23 trainees who mocked an accent and learned to love a man. This is the story of a cassette tape, a hand mirror, and a heart that refused to break. This is the story of how kindness sounds. It does not sound perfect. It sounds like someone trying. And that is enough. Thank you for listening. Iman would have thanked you too. He would have said it in his quiet voice, with his tired eyes and his steady hands. He would have said, "You stayed until the end. That is listening. That is everything. Now go, listen to someone today. Really listen. It is the only accent that matters.